Yo, Kpaceguy here. Hey, so I made a video probably close to 2 years ago about why you shouldn't put speakers in a corner. And this included floor standing speakers, subwoofers, just any speaker, keeping it out of the corner. But I recently got a comment about what should you do if you have to put a speaker in the corner. I think that's an excellent question. I realized in my video, I talked reasons why you shouldn't put a speaker in the corner and what it does to the sound and to your graphs, but sometimes you're just forced to. Me personally, my room that I have my home theater in, my speakers are in a corner too, and I have no choice but to put them there. So if that's you, what should you do in case you have to put your speakers in a corner? What measures should you take to make sure that you still get the best possible sound? We're going to talk about that today, but the first thing we need to understand is why we shouldn't put our speakers in the corner if we can avoid it. When you put a speaker in the corner, the biggest problem you're going to hear people talk about is bass. You're going to have either too much bass, or you may muddy the bass, or your sound may become intelligible, things like that. Basically, what we're telling you is you pretty much put your speaker box inside another box. That wall coming into a corner is like another box that you're putting your speaker into, and it usually negatively enforces mid bass and bass notes, therefore making your sound a little more chesty than you'd like, or depending on if you have an equal like symmetrical room, and if you don't have another corner over there on the other side, the speaker that is in the corner will sound a lot different than the other speaker on the opposite end that's not in a corner. So it can cause you a lot of weird issues. Calibration becomes tough too, because what room boundary gain is the inflation of bass. It's attenuated. If you have 100 decibels worth of bass and then you start pushing that bass into a corner, well, the bass starts to increase, and it may be too much that you can't EQ it, you can't fix it. So usually you want to avoid putting your speakers in a corner for that reason, although there are times when it may work into your favor. Maybe you have a small subwoofer, maybe 8-inch or 10-inch. Maybe you don't have money for a new one right now, you need a bigger one, but you only have, this one for now. If you tuck that subwoofer in a corner, it will perform louder than it actually is because of the boundary gain, the room gain you're getting off of being in a corner. So it can help things. Usually subwoofers, not loudspeakers though. That's truly the issue. So if you're just like me and you have to put your speakers in a corner, here's a few different tips that you can do to make sure that you get the best sound out of that corner, if that makes any sense. The first thing you can do, if we're talking in terms of subwoofers or loudspeakers, is to simply turn the bass down. Most AV receivers, if not all of them, and then all processors probably have the option to turn bass levels down. So you can go into the options and turn the bass and treble up, usually just like you can in the car. You can do that on most modern AV receivers and processors. Do that if you're having issues with bass, or do it anyway even if you don't think you're having issues, especially if only one speaker on one side of the room's in a corner. Maybe you have an open floor plan here, but it's a corner here. If one speaker is in the corner and one speaker is not, then the speaker in the corner is going to have more bass properties than the other one, just due to being close to the wall. So you're going to want to lower that bass because it's going to be attenuated, and typically it's negative. A way you can combat that is to simply lower the bass. Let's say you put your loudspeaker in the corner and you get 4 dBs of bass. Well, maybe knock it down a couple of clicks on the receiver to kind of retract a little bit of that negative bass that corner is bringing attention to. That'll help you a lot. Yes, we said putting a subwoofer in a corner can help a small subwoofer, but if you already have a big subwoofer, or maybe you have a small room, that's not something you want to do, is reinforce more bass, because not every frequency gets attenuated the same. You may put your speaker in a corner and get 40 hertz boost and it sounds terrible. Just because you put your speaker in a corner, you don't get all the bass frequencies attenuated, just a few different ones, and that's why sound becomes nasty. So turning the bass down a little bit can help you. Now, this is a really easy tip that I think you should follow even if you don't have your speakers in the corner, but that's to pull your speakers off the wall, especially if they're in a corner. Just because you have to put your speaker in the corner does not mean that you necessarily have to tuck it all the way in the corner. Pull it off the wall, typically a foot or two is usually good, but a lot of people don't have that space, especially because people walk through where their setup is. But if you can pull it out 4, 5, 6 inches, it'll make a difference. A lot of speakers, subs and loudspeakers included, have ports on the back. And so if you pull the speaker away from the wall, that port has less boundary gain being reinforced inside of it, therefore lowering the bass and giving you a more cleaner sound. Even if your speakers are not in a corner, it's still good to pull them off the wall, because even if your speakers aren't in a corner, just that one surface of wall can accent that port or that subwoofer. So you usually want to move it, a little bit more into the room. That way the room has less influence on the sound. Another really easy thing that you guys can do, especially if your sub or your speakers have ports, is to plug them. Me personally, my KEF R11s have 2 ports on the back, but they come with port plugs. Foam wedges that are about the same shape, slightly smaller, but really dense. You put them into the port and it blocks the bass from coming out. Yes, you do lose a little bit of bass and maybe even a little bit of low frequency response by plugging your ports, but because your speaker is in a corner, you're probably going to get some of that back anyway. This is an excellent way to lower the room boundary gain that you're going to get by putting your speaker in that corner. Now, maybe you don't have some speakers yet picked out or a subwoofer picked out, but you know that they're going to go in a corner. Maybe purchase some sealed speakers to begin with. I have all sealed subs in my room, so my placement option is a little more friendly. You can take a ported sub and play around with its rotation, I guess you can call it. Just because the speaker is up front and the amp is around back doesn't mean you can't turn your subwoofer sideways and point it a different direction. If you have a sub with a port on the back against the wall, play with it. Turn it sideways. Now the port is firing across the front of the wall instead of into the front of the wall, if that makes any sense. That'll help you. Again, pulling your sub off the wall will help you just like a loudspeaker will. Or if your sub is high dollar enough where you have the ability to port tune, where you can plug your ports and go into sealed mode, that's also a really good option. If you have a sub or a speaker that does not have foam plugs, simply put a sock in there. Don't pick one that your mom doesn't want you to steal. Don't take your girlfriend's sock and stuff in there. Find a sock or something you're not going to use or haven't been using for a while. A rag, that'll work too. Something pretty dense, and plug the port inside of your speakers. That way it acts as a port plug and you eliminate a little bit more of that boundary room gain, keeping your sound a little bit nicer. Now, if you have a modern AV receiver, you're going to have calibration built in, and truly that's the way to kind of make up for some of that room boundary gain. What I personally do in my home theater, because my speakers, my KEF R11s, my 4-stand speakers are in the corners, I first do a frequency sweep with no room correction, no DSP applied, and I see what is that corner doing to my system. So I literally see a graph and it shows me 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and it shows me how smooth or unsmooth that line is. That way I get a visual representation of what that wall or what my room is doing to the sound. That way I know how to attack the problem. So it's hard to know what the issue is without graphs sometimes, truly. Sometimes your ears may hear one thing, but a graph tells you a whole different story. So I look at graphs and I say, okay, I have a really bad bump at 85 hertz, 210 hertz, 450 hertz. I don't like that. It sounds bad. I'm going to fix it. This is when you get into calibration. You can run auto EQ on your receiver, or you can take it a step above and get a microphone and run Room EQ Wizard with a mini DSP. And you can affect your own graphs, lower some things, cut some things, make sure that the line is as smooth as possible. I do that all the time, not only in my home, but I also sit down in my car and run DSP in calibration and make sure that that line is smooth as well, to get the best out of my speakers and the best sound possible. I do it for my front speakers, I do it for my subs, I do it for anything that needs correction. The last thing that you can do, which does cost you a little bit more money, is acoustic treatment. There are acoustic panels that cover a wide range. You guys may think that acoustic panels just do one thing, and that's to stop an echo in the room. If you clap your hands and you have an echo, well, you get acoustic treatment and it lowers echo. But echo is a very high frequency. But what about bass? There are mid-range acoustic treatment that you can get to handle 200 hertz, 400 hertz, 300 hertz. You can get bass traps, put them in the corners to pull out. Bass traps, what they do is kind of move the bass out of the corner and keep it more into the room so that that boundary gain is to a minimum. It kind of shallows out the corner to a little bit, making the speaker not so deep into the corner. So if you don't have space to move your speakers out, putting a bass trap in that corner is a good option too. This kind of acoustic treatment costs some money. Anything that treats bass is going to be big, it's going to be thick, and it's going to cost you some money because of all the materials needed to effectively fix those large frequencies. So be prepared to spend some money if you're going to actually tackle bass with bass traps and acoustic treatment. Every other option I named is either free or very inexpensive. Other than that, acoustic treatment will cost you money, but it will greatly affect not only bass, but just all the frequencies, making it a lot nicer of a sound throughout the whole frequency spectrum for all your speakers. With that being said, guys, let me know some more tips that you have for tackling speakers that just have to be in the corner. What do you guys do to make sure that your sound sounds as good as possible? Or do you simply not care? Do you just put it in the corner and just it is what it is? Let me know that down below in the comment section. Hit that like button. Happy Mother's Day to all my moms out there. We will see you in the next video. Kpaceguy out. Peace.